السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد, and in today's video we are looking at a fantastic book written by Shaykh Shareef Hatim al-Awni, and it is titled al-Nazar al-Maqasidi wa ضوابطه وأثره في إثبات الرواية الحديثية وتأويلها, and this is by Shaykh Shareef Hatim and it is printed by Markaz Nama. In terms of reading size, you're looking at approximately 192 pages of reading, so it's not a massive book, but it's an immensely beneficial book, and it's all about maqasid, masalih, how do they work, how is it, how should we navigate between masalih and maqasid, especially in relation to the sunnah. So if we find something in the sunnah that seems to be contradicting masalih and maqasid, how do we work around that? And this is also one of the books that I benefited from in the writing of my Hanafi book. And if you're interested in my Hanafi book, An Introduction to the Hanafi Madhab Volume 1, and then I'm going to be teaching the entire book from February 15th for inshallah one entire year, and the lessons will take place once a week every Sunday. And if you're interested in this course, please do have a look at the link in the description. It's a fantastic course. I think you'll really benefit from it. So please do join us for that journey, inshallah ta'ala, that starts on February 15th. And by the way, I've also got notes on this book as well. And again, once again, everywhere where I put add to madkhal, it is a reference essentially to this Hanafi book that I've been writing for quite some time, alhamdulillah. And Allah knows best if it's going to be a fantastic book or if people will think it's not a. In any case, I'm very happy with the effort and very happy with the effort that Allah has put and given me the ability to put into this book. Whether it's successful or not is only in the hands of Allah the Almighty, and so must add to madkhal. I always put this, again, I come back to these notes, and this is sometimes a bit of a challenge because I put this at the start of every one of my books. I'll put different books that I'm writing and I'll just put a reference to the fact that it needs to be added or it needs to be considered to be added to that book. And then sometimes later on, after I've finished writing the book, I realize I've missed a few notes out, but it's not major, alhamdulillah. So how does this book actually work? Let's get into this book. Firstly, خلاصة التقرير عن المقاصد الشرعية, and then he starts off with his first chapter as a madkhal, al-Maqasidi. Then after that, you've got he divides the nusus of Sharia into two types. So you've got al-Qism al-Dini and al-Qism al-Dunyawi. Al-Qism al-Dini is bi'alaqat al-abd ma'a rabbih, all of those that are related to a servant and his Lord. They are in there, the illah or the maslahah rather is always going to be ta'abbud, the fact that we're just doing it simply out of worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because these are ibadat. Then you have those nusus, those aspects of Sharia, those, you could say, statements made by the Prophet ﷺ, made by the Quran that are related to our worldly life, and those, the default position is that it is going to be that there is a dunyawi maslaha, in the sense that there's some worldly and hereafter benefit, but it's going to be based on some type of benefit in this world that we can recognize with our rational mind as well. That's going to be the default. Then he gives, for example, different scenarios, and then he then goes into ahadith that seem to contradict. Basically, they are to do with worldly ahadith, so to speak. You could say, like, for example, ahadith of whether we are allowed to wear gold, etc. in this world, and whether we are allowed to wear silk, and the fact that they sometimes, does this contradict maslaha, and how should we navigate between them, around them. Then you got dawabitun naqd al-maqasidi li-sunnah, and then there's a fantastic chapter at the end. This chapter is a must read. فقه المصلحة قراءة في موقف الطوفي من المصلحة. When he looks at Najmuddin al-Tufi's opinions on maslahah, and he gives a really, you could say, intricate discussion on them. And one of the best unique features of this book, by the way, is the dawabit that he comes up with. Now, you might agree, you might disagree, you might whatever positions your positions are on the book, on the author, whatever it is, you can't deny the fact that he does come up with some dawabit that let you at least think, and you can ponder and you can think, okay, do I agree or disagree with this? How does it look? It's just some unique features in the book, some unique points that I picked up on. I thought that was fantastic. So for example, he calls Sheikh Ibn Ashur, who we know is probably one of the most prolific writers in this field in terms of the recent times. He calls him al-Mujaddid, al-Allamatul Mujaddid, and this has been mentioned by a number of scholars, by the way. Then later on now, when he starts to divide the nusus into two types, he mentions that you can divide nusus into two types. Yeah, he says حيث إن النصوص الشرعية كلها تنقسم إلى قسمين لا ثالث لهما، نصوص تنظم علاقة العبد بربه وسوف نصطلح على تسميته بالنص التعبدي والنصوص التعبدية، ونصوص تنظم علاقة العبد بالدنيا بالمخلوقات وسوف نصطلح على تسميته بالنص الدنيوي والنصوص الدنيوية. And when it comes to those aspects of the Quran and Sunnah that are to do with the servant and his Lord, the default is that the maslaha is ta'abbud. ta'abbud. That is the maslaha. And then he does a really fantastic job of what's the benefits behind ta'abbud itself, and how ta'abbud is not just like a whimsical maslaha, it actually has a huge impact in our sharia. Then he comes to al-qism al-thani min al-nusus al-dunyawiyya, and one of the unique features he makes in this point here is that not all nusus that are to do with a servant and the rest of the creation are always going to have a maslaha that is going to be of this world. Rather, sometimes the maslaha in there will also be ta'abbud, sometimes, but not the default. Then another really fantastic and beneficial point that I found in this book was on page 19, wherein he speaks about something which I sometimes refer to as Shaykh Suhail Hanif, and other writers refer to as legal meanings. Others, like for example Shaykh Anas Sarmini, refers to as qawa'id kulliyah. He calls it مآخذ. ومآخذ أبواب التشريع الإسلامي وهي المنطلقات التي بني عليها باب تشريعي معين مستنبطة من استقراء جميع تفاريعه. We've heard this term before, استقراء, by the way, and this is something that Shaykh Anas Sarmini spoke about. Others have also spoken about Shatibi, Al-Qarafi, so many others, and I speak about it in the Hanafi book as well. مسائله وأحكامها الفرعية المستنبطة من أدلتها التفصيلية. So مآخذ is what I kind of understood as Shaykh Shareef Hatim's term for legal meanings. And what I love, by the way, about something that Shaykh Shareef Hatim does in this book is that he makes a distinction between legal meanings and qawa'id fiqhiyya in a way in which it sounds very similar to Shaykh Salah al-Hajj. So I don't think he's probably even aware of this, or I don't even think Shaykh Salah al-Hajj would be aware of this, but maybe they are, maybe they've read each other's books, but they actually have come to the same conclusion, which is really cool. On page 19, when he divides, when he discusses what is a legal meaning, what is this ma'khadh, he explains how the difference between qawa'id fiqhiyya and these ma'akhid is that qawa'id fiqhiyya, they group everything together, whereas ma'akhid, their whole point is not grouping but tafri'. They help to create new masail. So that's why they are the number one thing that a faqih needs to have. So he actually mentions this. If you have a look on page, he says that basically understanding these ma'akhid al-sharia is the ultimate purpose of fiqh, right? تفقه مآخذ الشريعة هذا المقصد الحقيقي للفقيه. He says this on page 24. He says there and thereabouts to that idea. So he says وهكذا تتميز المآخذ بأنها تضبط التفقه وتضبط التفقه وتصوب فهمنا للنص الشرعي حتى في أمور التعبد، فهي تقوم بما يقوم به ظهور العلة المصلحية في ضبط الاستنباط، لكن العلل المصلحية تضبط الأحكام الدنيوية، وأما مآخذ الأبواب فتضبط حتى أمور العبادات. He carries on and he discusses this in detail here as well, how important ma'akhid are for a faqih. In any case, a few other interesting points. He mentions, like I said, on page 56, he discusses how some dunyawi rulings as well, i.e. an-nusus ad-dunyawiyya, they are also ta'abbudi, i.e. their maslaha has not yet been discovered, or for example, whatever it is, either their maslaha has not yet been discovered or the maslaha is ta'abbud, then in which case we should stick to their apparent as well. So he says, وَهَذَا سَبَبٌ آخر لوجوب الالتزام الأحكام الدنيوية حتى لو لم تظهر مصلحتها، فالأول كان هو احتمال الخفاء المصلحة، والثاني احتمال كون الحكم تعبديا أصلا. So sometimes even the dunyawi rulings, the illa is actually ta'abbud. Then now I'm going to go on to stuff that's not directly related to the book. His dawabit of naqd sunnah, by the way, his section on giving salam to the non-Muslims, starting off by giving salam to non-Muslims, is a must read. It's really unique stuff. On page 61, you've got a very, very interesting this point here. He mentions that Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj was one of the وهو من مؤسس علم العلل والمقصود أنه أول من وسع الكلام في الرواة جرحا وتعديلا. This is what he says about Shu'bah. So this is a really unique point. Then on page 114, he makes a comment about Ishaq ibn Rahweh. He says that he says لكن الغريب أن أحد أكثر فقهاء المحدثين صرامة في الالتزام بالظاهر خالف ظاهر الحديث. So he says he's أكثر الفقهاء المحدثين صرامة في الالتزام. أحد أكثر فقهاء المحدثين. Then one of the best discussions, by the way, in recognizing the merits and demerits of At-Tufi's arguments in Maslaha on page 162. Then on page 174, he realizes the key demerit in the argument of, you could say, At-Tufi in regards to Maslaha is that he considers masalih to be qat'i, definitive, which is not very accurate. And by the way, this theme runs throughout the actual book. قطعي ظني قطعي ظني. Is the nas ظني? Is the maslaha قطعي? Is the nas قطعي? Is the maslaha ظني? All of that. Is the قطعي ثبوت? Is the nas قطعي ثبوت قطعي دلالة? Is it ظني ثبوت ظني دلالة? That plays a huge role in how we deal with the maslaha. And is the maslaha قطعي? How strong is the maslaha? How strong is the nas? These are two things that a faqih needs to weigh up all the time. Then another very interesting point, by the way, on page 135 in regards to something that I've mentioned in my hadith book as well, Hanafi book, sorry, and it really, I got very excited when I saw this because I could add it straight away to my Hanafi book along with other, you could say, references I found to prove this point, is that the idea of the Zawahiriyah, or I don't want to say Zahiriyah, he calls it in this book, he makes a distinction between Zahiriyah and Zawahiriyah, if I'm not mistaken, that's the term he uses, that you see that these kind of tendencies to be a bit more literalistic and a bit more interpretive right from the time of the Sahaba. So you see Abdullah ibn Umar being a bit more literalistic, and he says that here, and you see some of the other Sahaba like Zayd ibn Thabit and Abdullah ibn Abbas being a bit more interpretive. And then the last section, by the way, he has a really lovely discussion on saghira and kabira. How do you distinguish between a saghira sin and a kabira sin, and how did the ulama do that? So this is a really just a unique beneficial book. A bit of a hard read in certain places. You'll just need to read it a few times, the paragraph, to understand exactly what he's trying to say, but a must read. And I really do hope you benefited from this video. I hope you buy this book, purchase it, have a read of it. You don't need to agree with everything in this book. I don't think he forces any of his opinions onto you, and I don't think he wants you to follow him, you know, literally 100%. That's not the idea behind this book. It's just a good book to kind of discuss, kind of develop your own thoughts and ideas, and just see if it helps to develop your own tafaqquh as well. So I hope you benefited from this video. Do give it a like, give it a share, and subscribe to this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you benefited from it. I hope to see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.